Hello, my friends. So it is New Year's Eve 2021, going into 2022. I don't know if 2022 is going to suck as bad as 2021 has. I don't know. Is it all downhill from here? Anyway, I'm doing another Extreme and Forgotten Blue review. Basically, movies that are in some way extreme or out there that have not, for some odd reason or another, been on Blu-ray yet. At least not Region A and easily accessible to cats like me. So, let me say this. I'm going to do today Drugstore Cowboy 1989 by Gus Van Sant. I'm getting a lot of notifications, so you might hear that beep beep. So let me repeat that. Drugstore Cowboy 1989 by Gus Van Sant. Not a big Gus Van Sant fan, but in 1990, I think this was the first movie of his I ever saw. Circa 1997, 98, next friend of mine let me borrow a videotape of this movie. Same friend who let me borrow Blue Collar, which I reviewed a few episodes back. Got me into a lot of great shit. He had quite a nice VHS collection. He had a lot of giallos and a lot of horror and a lot of 80s indie stuff. So this kind of falls under that ladder of those categories. I kind of avoided this movie in the early 90s because I thought Matt Dillon was, he's that teen heartthrob guy from all the Outsiders and all the teen heartthrob films. Anyway, so my friend was like, come on, man, you got to see Drugstore Cowboy. Now, my friend, of course, was a drug aficionado in real life, IRL, as we say now, on the interwebs. But man, he was right, because I was already a big William Burroughs fan, and William S. Burroughs has a small but pivotal role in this film. Stars Drugstore Cowboy. Stars Matt Dillon as Bob Hughes. This was a real person who his memoirs about being a drugstore cowboy informed this film, led to this film's script. Bob Hughes, he was not a character on As the World Turns, by the way. I mean, he was, but different Bob Hughes. For those oldsters in the audience, remember Bob Hughes, played by Don Hastings for like 45 fucking years. I grew up on soap operas, so loved As the World Turns. Anyway, I don't think that guy aged in 30 years, Don Hastings. But anyway, the real life Bob Hughes was a guy who primarily operated in the late 60s, early 70s, and he was that. He was the guy who would jack up pharmacies and hospitals and get hard drugs, to inject or to pop pills or narcotics or what have you. Heroin, morphine, Dilaudid, Demerol, you name it. The good stuff. So I've never done heroin, sorry. But I do think painkillers are wonderful. Anyway, maybe a little too revealing here. I suffer from chronic pain. So to me, like when I hear morphine and Dilaudid, I go, ooh, relief. There is the God. So I guess on one way I relate to this movie, even though these activities are recreational. But there's something he says toward the beginning when he shoots up after a successful heist of a pharmacy where one of his wards, his up-and-coming drugstore cowboy, is a drugstore, cowgirl, played by Heather Graham, a very, very young 19-year-old, incredibly attractive Heather Graham, goes through a faux seizure and topples over a comic book stand, and there's all kinds of 1970 issues of Fantastic Four, the era where Stan Lee was kind of still nominally writing, but we're getting into the John Romita, John Buscema art after Jack Kirby left for DC. Yes, I'm geeking out. Yes, I'm a little inebriated, but damn it, it's New Year's Eve. I do this anyway, even when I'm not inebriated. So it's a cool scene, and basically Bob, managed to hustle. He's got a crowbar he always uses to pry open the drawers of these pharmacies and get the good stuff. He doesn't really come away with a lot of good things in this haul. He gets some stool softener, etc. But his buddies, played by James LeGros, who I don't know for much after this movie, except he was in Phantasm 3 or 4, replacing the main guy, Michael, whatever his name is, who came back later. What else has James LeGros done? Probably a ton of stuff. And of course Heather Graham. And then anyway, Bob's girlfriend, Kelly LeBrock, who's luminous in this and very incredible. They're all very 70s chic. I love their costumes. Kelly LeBrock's character, she's particularly fetching in the long kind of Superfly leather trench coat. And they're married, and they have this kind of lifestyle, though you soon learn that Bob is pretty much functionally or dysfunctionally impotent due to his drug use. And it's starting to annoy his wife. I got the movie playing in the background. I wish it had subtitles, but it's one of those old school DVDs that didn't come with subtitles. I'm going to pause this so I can do a little visual aid. Hold on. I am back. Did you miss me? All right, so here's my visual aids. This is my old school DVD copy from Artisan before they were purchased by the smaller company Lionsgate. Front and back. They were kind of a big indie label in the early days of DVD. They were kind of competing. They were kind of a baby Miramax, releasing and new indie films in the 90s and also re-releasing stuff like this, earlier stuff. Of course, this has a gigantic catalog of artisan stuff. Not a lot in this booklet, but some info. Mr. Matt Dillon, he's kind of everywhere. There's Matt and Kelly. I just fucking adore this movie. So check this picture out with all 4 of the cowboys / cowgirls. There's something very effortlessly cool and hip about this movie, in the sense that I think some people thought this movie was cool and hip and trying to be cool and hip, but I don't see it that way. I think it's a more real, human look at people who live this lifestyle. And okay, I'm going to pause this. I have to answer a very quick message, and I'll be right. Okay, I have returned again. I have no clue what I was saying a few minutes ago, but I'll just dive back into it. So, Drugstore Cowboy is one of those movies that I guess to a lot of people, including myself when it came out, thought was trying hard to be hip or whatever. But to me, it's real. It's very genuine. It's very authentic. And in a way, it lampoons the glamorous side of drug addiction, how these people live with a lot of things. Like, for instance, the fact that Bob can't perform sexually with his, by most people's metric, super hot wife. She's not my personal favorite type, but I mean, I get it, and she's a little disappointed too, and I get that too. Bob has gotten to where heroin is his life, heroin and the hard drugs. Puts it in the beginning where he kind of blisses out. Famous scene early on when he shoots up after the first pharmacy heist. And all these weird, he's gazing out at the neighborhood they're traveling through on the way home because he can't even wait to get home to get high. And he's seeing first he's seeing stuff like the needles and the spoon he's using, then he's seeing cows and things floating in the air. And he's saying, it gives him this rosy hue. Everything takes on this rosy hue of unlimited success. That hooked me on Matt Dillon for life, pretty much, that little passage. So basically, this follows kind of their misadventures, disadventures, I don't know. I want to tell you all about this dream I had, but this probably isn't the right video to do it, so I won't do it. But it just kind of came to mind. Because this movie, and I guess watching it in this state of mind that I'm in now, it resonates really strongly with me. And I'm not a big drug guy. I mean, but I'm also not by any stretch an anti-drug guy or any of that stuff. I'm a pro-drug guy. I'm just not a huge drug user, but I'm not sure what led these characters to this. But with Bob, you kind of feel like he's one note until something happens. They do this big heist of a hospital and almost make it. He's scoring shit like Demerol and stuff, though he seems a little disappointed with that. Like it's not hard enough of a painkiller. And it's a pretty bold, crazy heist. He goes way out on a limb, literally out on a limb, to get this shit. Now, mind you, throughout the movie, he has a parole officer played by James Ramar. Now, I want to say James Ramar is one of those actors who I think has a career that is eclectic, to the extreme. And I think he's a guy who will never be really recognized in his lifetime because I'm not saying he's about to die, but I'm sure he's in his mid to late 60s at least by now, maybe older. And he's what we used to call in the olden days, a character actor. And he is such a fine character actor. Now, he started out as a fairly handsome young, not leading man, but supporting man in the Warriors in 1980. Now, 9 years later, he's playing Bob's parole officer in this. He's playing a little bit more of a authority figure. Now, he was in a ton of movies in the 90s and 2000s. But I guess in the popular consciousness of people, I don't want to say my generation, maybe the millennial generation, certainly. He's known for two TV roles. One, he played Dexter's deceased father, Harry Morgan, the police officer, who was dead, but constantly was counseling Dexter. He's the guy who came up with the code that Dexter lives by. I don't know if y'all watch Dexter or if you like it or hate it. With the revival show New Blood, Dexter New Blood, out, I'm finding out how many people actually really were into Dexter all along and how many people have never even seen Dexter and could care less about Dexter. I'm a huge fan. I became a huge fan, I guess, almost independently of, I don't want to say the trendiness of it, but the ubiquity of its popularity. Kind of the way of Hannibal, though I don't think Hannibal kind of reached the popularity level of Dexter in the popular culture. But Dexter, I saw the first episode, I guess you'd say live, when it debuted on Showtime back in New York in Greenwich Village. I guess 2006 maybe it started. It started around the same time as Weeds, and I saw the first episode of both of them. I can't remember if Weeds was on HBO or Showtime. But I had a girlfriend named Rachel. Rachel! I'm not going to say her last name. And we were a couple for a number of years, and she lived in Greenwich Village. This was the nexus point of activity. She helped get me into the comic book industry, or try to get into the comic book industry. That's a subject for another whole video. But we would hang out at her brownstone, overpriced brownstone in Greenwich Village, upstairs in the loft, and we often watched. Her mom had all the cable channels, and we watched on a little TV in her crowded bedroom, and we watched the first Weeds and the first Dexter when they first came out, the night they debuted. And I don't know how it just kind of timing was like that. I just happened to be in New York when that happened. And they were both great. They both become lifetime favorites of mine. Weeds is a show I totally love. I used to love Weeds a lot more than Dexter, but I think as time has gone by, I like Dexter better. But they're both about drugs, and they're both, Weeds is about drugs like Drugstore Cowboy is. Dexter is more about, serial killers and violence. But to me, they're both demythologizing extreme behaviors. Of course, in Dexter's case, it's always going to be a taboo because serial killers are fucked up. I'm not advocating serial killers. But Dexter is kind of on the edge. He's a vigilante. So he only kills those who deserve to die. Kind of like Batman and Daredevil only, beat the shit out of those and almost kill those who deserve to die. Punisher, kind of like the Punisher. He's not a half measure, as John Bernthal's Punisher would say. Dexter's a full measure, as the guy in Comics Explained, Rob would say. Weeds, though, is more about the whole weed thing. And, of course, since Weeds has come out, look at how many states have legalized marijuana. And, of course, we have a president who could, with a sign of a pen via executive order, legalize cannabis in all 50 states, but will not because he's a drug warrior and a fossil and a dinosaur and a mean man. That's the subject for another video. Back to Drugstore Cowboy, which kind of comes full circle because this is about. I personally believe that all vice should be legal. That's my opinion. All vice, prostitution, gambling, all drugs, hard drugs, it doesn't matter. Tax it, whatever you're going to do with it. Whether the government makes some money off it or not, the government's going to make money off big pharma anyway. So what does it matter, right? So in Bob's case, Bob is in a culture where Bob Hughes in Drugstore Cowboy is in a culture where all these drugs are illegal. And so this is his life. His life is this is the 70s. He's a pirate. Kelly LeBrock's character really looks cool. In a few shots, she kind of reminds me of Christina Lindbergh in They Call Her One Eye. This kind of tall, slim woman with the long, straight brown hair and the trench coat and the boots. She just needs a sawed-off shotgun and an eye patch. By the way, Thriller, They Call Her One Eye, Thriller, cool picture. Thriller Eingrim film is coming out on Blu-ray in January. I have pre-ordered my copy. I don't know when it'll come, but I got it through Diabolic DVD, which I highly recommend ordering from if you're trying to boycott Amazon but still want these movies, these obscure movies on Blu-ray at a good price. I'm excited. I'll review it as soon as I get it. But anyway, in the movie, Bob and his wife kind of split. And the result is Bob has this myth or superstition about the hat on the bed. Don't leave the hat on the bed. And while he is doing the daring hospital raid, the Heather Graham character, she leaves the hat on the fucking bed. And then she takes all of his dilaudid, all of it, and ODs, and she's like a Romero zombie, and she's blue-eyed, and her the makeup's great. Her eyes are like this kind of opaque, crystalline, staring widely kind of look. So this breaks Bob down. And there's like, is Bob going to go on this path? No more. He's shaken by this superstition. And so he chucks it all. He goes cold turkey. He lives in the streets. He lives in the gutter. He finally gets a place. And he's finally making his parole officer, James Ramar, happy. I was talking about James Ramar like 10 minutes ago. So anyway, James Ramar is mainly known by my generation, your generation, what have you, as Dexter's father. That's how I got on the Dexter thing. But most recently, he plays Gamby on Black Lightning. 4 seasons of Black Lightning, and recently come to an end at a good place. Black Lightning, I think, is in some ways the finest show to come out of DC's attempts at TV superheroes, especially on the CW. By far on the CW. It's not a part of the very small constellation of shows that were more adult that came on DC Universe and then moved over to HBO Max, which are Doom Patrol and Titans, which I am obsessed with both. Have yet to review either. Promise I will. And the defunct after one season Swamp Thing, which I did like. I don't love it. Best adaptation of Swamp Thing so far. Maybe not the best that could happen, but I liked it. Stargirl was a transition show that began on DC Universe and aired on DC Universe and CW. So when DC Universe folded, it went lock stock over to CW because it was not an adult-oriented show. And of course, it is a loose adaptation of the Justice Society comics by Jeff John, the JSA series from the late 90s to 2000s, which I have most of the issues. Have not watched all of Stargirl, only a few episodes here and there. But anyway, they kind of took the adult shows and moved them over to HBO Max. Titans, Doom Patrol. Okay. So Black Lightning was squarely on CW, but it was not on the level of Titans and Doom Patrol as far as like the cursing and the nudity and the gore adult level. But as far as the social commentary, the level of seriousness of it, it was I guess you would say, deeply serious show. And really had a lot to say about race in America today, and a lot of great metaphors for this stuff within using the meta-humans as a metaphor, just like the X-Men movies, to varying levels of success, use the same metaphor for those discriminated against. Anyway, James Ramar played the only white major character, really the only white character that I can think of on Black Lightning. He was kind of a mentor parent figure to the orphaned Jefferson Pierce, our main character played by Cress Williams. Black Lightning was just an incredible show. It definitely embraced and yet transcended its genre. So anyway, that's James Ramar. So he's really good in this movie. But after Bob comes clean in Drugstore Cowboy, the movie I'm actually reviewing, he ends up with a social worker, and it's a scene that a young black woman, and it's funny. This is 1989, set in the early 70s, and yet what has changed? Not a whole lot. And it's not always to do with drugs, but like look at the scenes in Joker where Joaquin is seeing the young black female social worker, and she's constrained by the system too, and so as far as in real life, in the 30 some years between these movies, and I mean in film world, coming out when the films came out, and then the setting between the early 70s and the early 80s in Joker when that was set, and then now what's changed in 45 years is what I'm saying, and people still are not tolerant of people with mental health issues, addiction issues. But anyway, this segues into him meeting Father Tom, and Father Tom is played by Bill Murray. I am drunk. William S. fucking Burroughs. William Seward Burroughs, in my mind, the greatest writer of the 20th century. My favorite writer overall. He does a beautiful job, and Gus Van Sant uses this screenplay for Burroughs as a vehicle for Burroughs' personal views about drugs and how the whole thing about the drug issue fits into American culture and the government, because Burroughs, of course, was famously a junkie. And he wrote several books about it, and he analyzed the situation inside and out, from the side of someone who was the junkie to someone who was clean, to someone who was relapsing. There used to be a lot of popular mythology that Burroughs kicked his habit in the 60s, and that was that. And then late 70s, 1980, he met his younger lover, James Grauholtz, his literary agent, and he finally started making a lot of money off his writing. Now Burroughs grew up. I wouldn't be remiss to do a short bio on Burroughs, because he is a key component of this movie, Drugstore Cowboy. Burroughs' grandfather invented the adding machine, the precursor to calculators. So he was rather wealthy, and Burroughs grew up wealthy. He was born in 1914, and he was rather wealthy. So he traveled a bit, and he was a bit of a hedonist guy. He was a repressed homosexual. What a time to cough, huh? No, but that's kind of how it is, right? As he was a repressed homosexual man, he married a woman, Joan Balmer, in the 40s, and he had a bit of a heroin habit, and then he killed her in a game of William Tell. He actually shot her in the head instead of shooting the glass on her head. People have debated endlessly over whether that was an accident, a murder, I don't know how to put it, accidental on purpose kind of thing. Some people have posited that it was him purging himself of his bourgeois self, the old self that was dying, the heterosexual moneyed self, and liberating him. Like at the end of Cronenberg's well-intentioned but wrong-headed adaptation of Naked Lunch, it's like he shoots her, and then in the end he's able to become a writer. And he goes over and crosses over into this mythical world of Anexia and into the inner zone and becomes a writer. So that's a dramatic take on it. Burroughs himself has kind of entertained all these possibilities in his own writings and interviews. And Burroughs' interviews are just as interesting, if not more fascinating to me than his fiction. I like his nonfiction way better than his fiction, and I love his fiction. So Burroughs in the early 1950s finally put out Junkie and Exterminator. and then proceeded on to the late 50s with Naked Lunch, and kind of broke through in a weird way, in that he was immediately, his book was banned for obscenity, and it went to the Supreme Court. And it came out on top, basically. It won the obscenity case, albeit maybe barely. So what I was going to say is, the myth is that then he kicked. Actually, he moved to New York in the 70s and became a Bowery resident and hung out with the punk rock scene, especially Patti Smith and such. And he became a heroin addict again during that period. And then he finally kicked. And hung out with James Gerholtz around 1980. They moved in together, and yes, Gerholtz got his affairs in order. So for the last 15 years or so of his life, he finally did make profit off of his work. He really hadn't made profit off his work. He basically, I guess you could say, pissed away his inheritance from the Adding Machine, and he has a great book of interviews and nonfiction called The Adding Machine. And then kind of was poor and kind of hoofing it, this kind of beatnik lifestyle from the 50s and 60s, and he, skipped out to Tangier for a while. He left the country for a while after the death of his wife, and he didn't do quite a Roman Polanski. He wasn't completely exiled, but he did come back to the U.S., like I said, maybe the late 60s, early 70s, and ended up in New York in the late 70s. But he did spend a lot of time in the late 50s to early 60s in Tangier, and that was a creatively fertile period where he learned the cut-up technique from Brian Geisen, which most people credit him with creating. And then he applied it to his trilogy, great, incredible literary trilogy. I'm not getting these in order, but The Ticket That Exploded, Soft Machine, Nova Express, all brilliant. And of course, they did a bunch of films together with Anthony Bach, filming them. Films like The Cut-Ups and Towers Open Fire, Bill and Tony, Bill Buys a Parrot, also incredible. That might be a collection that I might review on the Extreme and Forgotten show too, because those have yet to come out on Blu-ray. So anyway, that's Burroughs, and in this film, he's kind of a mentor, a sage-like figure to Bob. He's someone who's kicked Reverend Tom or whatever. He's kind of kicked the junk, and he's kind of low key mentoring Bob on it. Like, I know what you've been through. Here's where I'm at now. Tell me, are you holding? Like, I've kicked it, but just in case, are you holding, man? In other words, you have some on you. So Bob goes to work in a factory, and he ends up getting held up by this cat played by what's this cat's name? I feel terrible that I'm not going to remember this actor's name. It's going to haunt me till I'm dead. It's somebody you guys probably know, and it's on the tip of my phone. But this is what happens when I do unrecourse videos, and I'm a little tipsy. He was in Twin Peaks: The Return, Matt Perlich. Matt Perlich is a kind of weird little idiosyncratic, I'm little, he's 5'4", I'm 5'3". He's an idiosyncratic actor. He was nominated for an award in the film Georgia, which I believe had Jennifer Jason Leigh. And yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. And looking at his looking at his filmography here, and Georgia. He was in Rush. He was in a lot of movies where drugs are involved. Georgia, yes, Jennifer Jason Leigh by Ulo Grossbard, who did the incredible Straight Time with Dustin Hoffman, another movie that, isn't on Blu-ray yet, I don't think. Anyway, yeah, he had a very small role in Twin Peaks, The Return in 2017. Yeah, there we go. And that's actually the last logged performance by him. Max Perlich. Yeah, so his character is kind of like a low-grade dealer who's kind of trying to hustle and rip off Bob in the beginning. And in the end, he's kind of worked his way up the hierarchy. He shoots Bob. Now, this is after Bob has had a visit from his ex-wife, and now she and the character James LaGrosse is playing, they've become lovers, whatever, and they're, running together, hustling together, doing the drugstore cowboy cowgirl dance together, and by this time, Bob is very contemplative, and he's really heeding the stuff that Reverend Tom tells him, like, drugs have been systematically demonized and scapegoated in America. And then he says something really profound. The idea that drugs could be a solution or an alternative, a boon, basically, to someone with a hellish existence, that idea is anathema to these assholes. And that's true. And the government is buying and selling, peddling fear. Some people have a hellish existence, and to some people, drugs, you could say an escape. But what about people like myself with chronic pain? It's not so much an escape, it's just like, now we can tolerate life. Now I can think straight. Long enough to get my bearings. Perish forbid that we should be penalized for something that is synthesized, but still yet occurs in nature, and has for millennia, and has been used for these same reasons. But our society has created a bureaucracy in order to control and demonize it, to profit off of its illegality and its taboo nature. It's fucked up. Anyway, he sees his wife, and he's a little horny when he sees her. It's like, whoa, he suddenly got his sex urge back. See, this is what we were talking about earlier. But anyway, he gets held up by Max Perlick's character, shot. He doesn't even have any drugs, anymore. And he goes to the hospital. He's being wheeled away, and then he's like, thinking, the voiceover, and he's like, I'm going to the biggest pharmaceutical place, there is, this city hospital. So, yeah, for pain, he's going to get drugs, and the implication, obviously, he's going to fall off the wagon. What are the other implications of that? He's seen both sides of it, the sobriety of it, the addiction of it, the glorification of it, and the banality of it, and he's seen a wisdom, a lifestyle, a simple life that, he doesn't need it. And he's had a high-risk lifestyle where he does need it. And he's kind of found a philosophical balance like the William Burroughs character. So who knows where he's going to go next. And that's the film full circle, because it opens with him, being wheeled into the hospital. And you don't know why, but then you find out. So I got to say, this is one of my favorite films. I've gone way all over the map here. I'm going to wrap this up real quick, but I want to say that I love it, and it is resonant to me. It was resonant to me before I ever tried drugs. I didn't really try drugs per se until I was 30 years old. I saw this movie when I was 28, I think, and I never even got super drunk until I was 30. But again, my friend who showed me this video is the same guy who got me really drunk and got me high on weed for the first time. And of course, since then, due to my medical conditions, I've had to contend or subsist on painkillers as much as possible, as much as I'll be allowed, because our system is seized by this drug hysteria because of opioid abuse. I'm not saying opioid abuse doesn't exist, but I don't think everyone should be penalized for it. We're not all methed out guys living in the ghetto. And the thing is, I don't judge those people either. They're also living under a system they can't control. There are people who are exploitative, who deal to children and do fucked up things on meth and hard drugs. But I gotta say, I've been close to some people who ended up going down that road, and I can't say I respected their choices, but I will say this: I understand it to an extent. It's not my choice. It's not where I would go. But sometimes it's all you have, and I think this movie shows you every angle, of that argument, of that issue. So I'm done. I'm trying to squeeze in a few more videos before I completely blank-headed and do my best of and worst of movies I've seen for the first time in 2021. But anyway, in the meantime, take care. Happy New Year. Rock on. That didn't work, did it? Okay, let's try again. Rock on.